All right, let's dive right into this explainer of a really fascinating, highly poetic, and honestly profoundly challenging guide to spiritual ascension. It's titled, Let Us Not Stop a Childlike Heart. Today, we're going to explore a framework derived straight from the source text that asks us to completely rethink our relationship with the world, with suffering, and ultimately with ourselves. I found this concept so interesting because this isn't just about feeling a tiny bit more peaceful on your morning commute. Oh no, it is a radical dismantling of the ego in favor of a massive cosmic perspective.
Right out of the gate, we're hit with this striking paradox from the text: death is where life is reborn. I mean, let that sink in for a second. We spend so much of our lives, so much of our energy trying to avoid endings, right? We fear the end of a job, the end of a relationship, and for sure, the end of our physical lives. Yet this source material suggests something completely radical. It says our greatest transformations actually rely on those very endings. It's a total perspective shift, and it perfectly sets the stage for a countercultural philosophy that upends how we usually view our daily existence.
Okay, let's move into section 1, the path of devotion, grounding ourselves. So, how do we actually begin this kind of transformation? Well, the author outlines a structured journey that actually starts firmly with our physical roots. The text introduces us to the concept of life shunyun, framing it as the way of the greatest creator. To walk this path, the text states we have to practice a radical level of giving. We're not just talking about donating a few bucks or volunteering some spare time on a weekend. It is an absolute, unwavering devotion aimed at letting go of the ego entirely to achieve what the author calls heavenly life wealth. It's the idea that our true value isn't stored in some physical bank account, but rather in our spiritual ledger. And this devotion, it has very specific targets. We are instructed to dedicate ourselves to the land that birthed us, to humanity as a whole, to nature, and to literally all other life forms. Think about the sheer scope of that for a moment. By giving everything we have to these 4 pillars, the text argues, we cultivate a perfect, noble soul. It's just a beautiful, deeply interconnected way to view our place in the ecosystem. You aren't just an isolated individual trying to get ahead, you're in a continuous relationship of devotion to the very environment and life forces that sustain you. Moving right along to section 2, power of the egoless mind, shedding the self. Once we've grounded ourselves in that outward devotion, the philosophy guides us deeply inward. The text presents a fascinating solution to human suffering through the psychological framework of having no ego. Now, the logic here is incredibly direct. If you give up yourself, if you truly have no ego, you have no desire to fight. And if you don't fight, well, you don't get hurt. The author suggests that shedding our ego means we simultaneously shed all of our vulnerabilities to emotional pain, worries, and fear. You're essentially removing the target from your back by removing the you that wants to be defended. Sounds super easy in theory, right? But in practice, it is a massive psychological shift. Now, what's really interesting about this contrast is how it challenges us to look in the mirror and question if we are the ones causing harm, rather than just defaulting to our usual state of feeling victimized. The worldly reaction is to judge society, to point fingers at our neighbors, and to feel deeply hurt when we think we've been wronged. But the childlike heart reaction, it completely flips the script. It is pure, unfiltered self-reflection. When we think others have hurt us, the text says we're actually fundamentally wrong. We should instead reflect on whether we have hurt others. The author insists this isn't cowardice and it's not escaping reality. It's the necessary, humble character of a truly mature soul. To achieve this mature soul, the text uses some pretty stark imagery. We're urged to pay off all our debts to Mother Nature and return what belongs to Satan, which, in this context, is a metaphor for our negative, selfish, and worldly attachments to Satan. And what belongs to the Creator goes back to the Creator. It's really about stripping away everything that isn't purely us. You drop the baggage of greed, the desire for status, those petty, everyday grievances, leaving behind nothing but a perfect, intact heart filled entirely with pure love. Which brings us to section 3, navigating hardship with love, the crucible. So how does an egoless mindset, armed only with a loving heart, handle the inevitable pain of real life? It is entirely natural for us human beings to avoid pain. I mean, we spend millions of dollars and countless hours trying to make our lives softer, more comfortable, and easier. But the text asks us to completely reconsider the actual purpose of our worldly struggles. It poses a bold, uncompromising claim. Hardship is actually a good thing. I absolutely love the imagery the author uses here to explain this concept. A lark can only become a phoenix in the raging fire. Silkworms can only grow after the exfoliate.
Using this incredibly vivid language, the author frames difficulties not as cruel punishments or just bad luck, but as the very crucibles required for our transformation. It completely changes how we look at our bad days. Without the tight, restrictive cocoon, the caterpillar never becomes the butterfly, right? And without the raging fire, the bird never transcends its earthly form. So the crucial takeaway here is that calmly accepting the bitter stuff is an absolute necessity for our spiritual maturity. Without experiencing difficulties, our will and our faith simply cannot be honed. The text actually instructs us to go as far as leaving the sweet fruits of our labor to others. Why? Because caring about those worldly gains, claiming the prize at the end of the hard work, just distracts us. The struggle itself is what's refining us, and that refinement is the true reward. Let's turn to Section 4, Reimagining Death and Loss, the Great Transition. This radical acceptance of daily hardship eventually culminates in how the philosophy approaches humanity's ultimate fear, death and loss. While deeply valuing and revering life, the author positions death not as some terrifying end to be fought against tooth and nail, but as a fair transition governed by the Tao, the natural underlying order of the universe. It is the great equalizer. The text encourages us to live happily today, fully engaged, but, if death comes tomorrow, to accept it with joy. Because, remember our hook from the beginning? If we don't die here, we can't be reborn there.
And where exactly is there? Well, that depends entirely on what you value and where you've stored your wealth. The text insists we absolutely must disregard material gains entirely, allowing others to enjoy the physical fruits of our labor while we rack up wealth in heaven. Where our wealth is, so do our souls reside. It's an incredibly clear equation. If your wealth is tied up in a physical bank account, a big house, and your social status, your soul is inherently trapped in the worldly plane. But if your wealth is built in your noble character, your egoless mindset, and your perfect love, then your soul resides in the heavenly plane. Finally, we reach Section 5, the ultimate surrender, cosmic ascension. This is where the training wheels completely come off, and the text asks for the ultimate surrender. The author dramatically contrasts the short-sighted tragedy of worldly battles with the unrestrained, celestial freedom of simply stepping back. Worldly people fight tooth and nail for victory in a flash moment, constantly trying to assert dominance and control over others. But the awake person, the one with the childlike heart, they outright refuse to fight. They realize that everything in the complex human world is just the simple rules of the natural order playing out, and they just refuse to get caught up in the machinery. Which leads to some of the most challenging, counterintuitive advice in the entire text. If someone wants to forcefully take something from you, the radical instruction here is to simply let them have it. Just let him take it. I mean, think about how incredibly difficult that is. Every fiber of our being wants to scream, "No way, that's mine, that is not fair." But this philosophy demands absolute non-attachment. The object doesn't matter, your peaceful reaction is what matters. Furthermore, if someone wants to use force to prove their strength, step aside and let them have their momentary victory. Let him be the hero. Again, completely against our human instincts, right? But the text says do not engage in the power struggle. Let them win the worldly battle, because you're focused on a completely different plane of existence. By refusing to fight back, you are effectively stepping out of the exhausting cycle of victory and defeat entirely. And this brilliantly illustrates the philosophy's ultimate conclusion. Do not attach to anything. Follow nature and follow the flow of the universe. Let it go and let all go. By giving up the fight, treating everything with a deep, abiding love, and refusing to harbor resentment, you ensure your ultimate destination is secured. You let the natural order judge who is right or wrong in the grand scheme of things, and you just enjoy an unrestrained, joyful journey through whatever time you happen to have left. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you to ponder this profound shift in perspective. If we truly maintain a childlike heart, if we stop fighting the raging fires and instead allow them to refine us, what is the one thing we actually carry forward? If everything worldly fades like passing clouds, the arguments, the possessions, the fleeting victories, where does your ultimate wealth truly lie?